Chapter 8. Hitler and the Rise of Bush.
So last September 17th, I became the first journalist in U.S. history to go to the U.S. National Archives and the Library of Congress and pore over the thousands of pages of documents in both places to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt or any refutation of the facts that Prescott Bush, the grandfather of George W. Bush, and George Herbert Walker, his maternal great-grandfather for whom his daddy is named, were Nazi traitors to the country who should have been tried for treason.
An extract from an interview investigative journalist John Buchanan gave on September the 29th, 2004, revealing not only damning revelations concerning both Prescott Bush and other American bankers who aided the Nazis during World War II, but the breathtaking duplicity of the media in attempting to hide their crimes. Treachery confirmed by the British Guardian newspaper who, after dispatching a reporter to validate the legitimacy of documents Buchanan discovered in the American National Archives, wrote in September 2004, George Bush's grandfather, the late U.S. Senator Prescott Bush, was a director and shareholder of companies that profited from their involvement with the financial backers of Nazi Germany. The Guardian has obtained confirmation from newly discovered files in the U.S. National Archives that a firm of which Senator Prescott Bush was a director was involved with the financial architects of Nazism. His business dealings, which continued until his company's assets were seized in 1942 under the Trading with the Enemy Act, has led more than 60 years later to a civil action for damages being brought in Germany against the Bush family by two former slave laborers at Auschwitz. To comprehend how such an event occurred while Allied troops were dying in their thousands, it's first necessary to understand the Nazi phenomenon was no historical coincidence, far less the philosophical whim of just one man. As the previous chapter demonstrates, Nazism had its leather-panting fan club, many of them luminaries of the financial, political and academic worlds. Neither, as evidenced by the speeches of Captain Ramsey and the appeasement of the mule-led Cliveden set, was admiration for Nazi ideology confined within the borders of America. Indeed, it was an ideology whose roots ran considerably deeper. Rhodes' mentor John Ruskin was for instance buried with a swastika carved on his tomb. A powerful example of how his imperialist vision of a racially superior English was intimately linked to the Nazi vision of a racially superior Aryan race. Shared ideology embodied within a swastika, a symbol of the secret Thule Society, of which both Ruskin and subsequently Hitler were members. A symbol also instrumental in defining the Nazi mysticism indoctrinated within the ranks of the SS, those feared elite of Hitler's armies, destined to blitzkrieg west then east across the European continent. Radicalized warriors ultimately spawned from an earlier army of some 400,000 brownshirts. Pre-war troops who'd first propelled Hitler from a minor radical far-right leader to become the dictatorial Führer of Germany. But kitting, arming and retaining such an army demanded considerable sums of money, sums Hitler definitely didn't possess. Perhaps fortuitous then, for Hitler anyway, that a decade earlier in 1922, just as National Socialism was emerging from the brutal aftermath of World War I, railroad impresario and Skull and Bones member W. Averell Harriman traveled to Berlin and interviewed the Thyssen family with a view to founding a German U.S. bank. Fruitful discussions, that a year later in 1923, saw Harriman and the Thyssen's establish the Union Banking Corporation and appoint a fellow Skull and Bones member Prescott Bush as the bank's president, followed in 1926 by his nomination as vice president and partner at Brown Brothers Harriman. Banks that now allowed the Thyssen's to surreptitiously route money to the United States from Germany via the Netherlands. Thus Union Banking Corporation became a secret channel not only to protect Nazi capital leaving Germany for the US, but also to enable the Nazis to retrieve funds via Brown Brothers Harriman, who transferred them directly to Germany. circumventive transactions, effectively making Prescott Bush the Nazis' first money launderer. Their chief partner in this illegal venture was Fritz Thyssen, a Nuremberg war criminal, and author of the appropriately entitled, "I Paid Hitler." A Teutonic, leather-panting Nazi admirer who, as early as the beginning of the 1920s, contributed some $25,000 to the recently formed German National Socialist Workers' Party, thus becoming the first major financier of the Führer in his ascent to power. Ideological starlust further demonstrated in 1931, when Thyssen became a card-carrying party member, swiftly rising to become one of the most powerful members of the Nazi war machine. A period marking the latter stages of Hitler's heady ascent to dictatorship, when the U.S. Embassy in Berlin reported back to Washington that the costly election campaigns and the cost of maintaining a private army of 300,000 to 400,000 men had raised questions as to the Nazis' financial backer. The answers to which became abundantly clear when the constitutional government of the German Republic moved in a desperate last-minute bid to defend national freedom by ordering the Nazi Party's private armies disbanded. In response to which, the U.S. Embassy subsequently reported, the Bush-Harriman-Hamburg America shipping line was purchasing and distributing propaganda attacks against the German government. Actions placing both Bush and Harriman as not just financial, but active political backers of the Nazi regime during a bloody period when thousands of Hitler's opponents were shot and intimidated by his Nazi brown shirts. Ideological troops mostly carrying US-supplied weapons. Arms subsequently linked to the original Merchant of Death, Samuel Pryor, a founding director of both the Union Banking Corporation and American Ship and Commerce Corporation. Companies that, along with Pryor's position as the executive committee chairman of Remington Arms, made him a central figure in the world's weapons trafficking business used to arm the Hitler Project. A role greatly enhanced by his position as the Bush family's partner in Nazi Party banking and transatlantic shipping. A role in which it's clear he positively thrived, because the U.S. Senate arms traffic investigators who probed Remington after it was joined in a cartel agreement on explosives with the Nazi firm IG Farben, stated. German political associations, like the Nazi and others, are nearly all armed with American guns. Arms of all kinds coming from America are transshipped in river barges before the vessels arrive in Antwerp. They then can be carried through Holland without police inspection or interference. The Hitlerists and Communists are presumed to get arms in this manner. The principal arms coming from America are Thompson submachine guns and revolvers. The number is great. But it wasn't only small arms Harriman and Bush helped provide. Incredibly, their Union Banking Corporation under Prescott Bush's direction, and with the long-term cooperation of Fritz Thyssen's German Steel Trust, participated in the emergence, preparation, and financing of the Nazi war machine through the manufacture of armored vehicles, fighter planes, guns and explosives. A fact underlined by a 1942 U.S. government investigative report stating Bush's Nazi front bank was an interlocking concern with the Vereinigte Stahlwerk United Steelworks Corporation or German Steel Trust, led by Fritz Thyssen and his two brothers. A conclusion starkly underlined when, after the war, congressional investigators probed the Thyssen interests, Union Banking Corporation, and related Nazi units and found that the Vereinigte Stahlwerk had produced the following approximate proportions of total Nazi German national output. 50.8% of pig iron, 41.4% of universal plate, 36% of heavy plate, 38.5% of galvanized sheet, 45.5% of pipes and tubes, 22.1% of wire, 35% of explosives. Stunning numbers, revealing Hitler could never have created the Nazi war machine without the unholy trinity of Bush, Harriman and Thyssen. a war machine that no doubt helped create the hail of lead raining down on U.S. forces as they landed near Algiers in November 1942, the very moment Nazi interests in a Silesian American corporation, long managed by Prescott Bush and his father-in-law George Herbert Walker, were finally seized under the Trading with the Enemy Act. A belated action, in which, incredibly, the government announced it was seizing only Nazi interests, leaving the Nazis' U.S. partners to carry on the business. Which is of course what Prescott and Harriman did, netting them both substantial fortunes. One of which was to lay the foundations of the Bush presidential dynasty to follow, though this was a long way in the future. Firstly, there was the little matter of World War II.